The auction barn smelled of dust, sweat, and a faint trace of old hay. Sam Lawson stood near the back of the crowded room, her fingers nervously tightening around the worn leather strap of her jacket. Her heart raced in her chest as she watched the auctioneer's hand wave over the pitiful creature being paraded into the center. A battered gray mare, her ribs visible beneath a coat that was once a proud silvery sheen, now a dull and tattered mess. The horse limped as she was led forward, her eyes wide with fear. Sam could feel her stomach twist. Something about this horse struck her. She didn't know why, but she couldn't look away. Up next, folks, the auctioneer's voice boomed, drawing everyone's attention to the horse, is lot 47. This mare's got no papers, no pedigree. All right, we're starting the bidding at $75. A murmur passed through the crowd. The horse was nothing but trouble. Too old, too damaged. There wasn't a soul in the room who would look at her and see anything but a burden. But Sam saw something else. The eyes of the mare, wide and desperate, were locked with hers. It was as if the horse knew something. Maybe it was her imagination, or maybe it was just the desperation of having lived through a life that had left her broken, like Sam herself. Sam took a step forward, her boots scraping against the dusty floor. She had no money, no resources, but she had something the others didn't. A deep, gnawing need to save this animal, to make something good come from the wreckage of her own life. The auctioneer's voice rang out again. Yeah, $75. Any takers? Her hand shot up without thinking, her voice unsteady. I'll take her. The room went silent. The other bidders stared at her as if she had lost her mind. A girl, no older than 18, standing in the back, daring to take on the broken horse no one else wanted. $75 to the young lady in the back, the auctioneer called. He didn't even bother hiding his disbelief. Anyone else? No one moved. The mare was hers. Sam didn't even have a chance to breathe before the auctioneer was calling for the next lot, already moving on to the next horse. She watched him go, her mind racing. She didn't know how she was going to pay for the horse, how she was going to care for her, but it didn't matter. Somehow, she would make it work. They handed her the horse's lead, and Sam led the mare out of the barn, the eyes of the auctioneer and the rest of the crowd still burning in the back of her mind. Back at her aunt's farm, the mare, who Sam had named Silver Echo, stood quietly in the barn. The light from the fading sunset filtered through the slats of the barn, casting long shadows across the hay-strewn floor. Sam moved around her with careful steps, a strange mixture of awe and pity in her heart. Her aunt, Lorna, had watched the whole thing from the front porch, her arms crossed over her chest. You sure about this, Sam? You don't have the money to feed another mouth? Sam nodded, though she wasn't sure of anything. She needs help, Aunt Lorna, and I can't just leave her there. I know she's not perfect, but I can see something in her. She's not worthless. Lorna's gaze softened, though there was a hint of concern in her eyes. I hope you're right, kid. But horses like her, sometimes it's better to let them go. They've got too much baggage. You'll learn that soon enough. Sam didn't respond. She just walked over to the horse and placed a gentle hand on her neck. Silver Echo flinched, but Sam stayed steady, offering comfort without expecting anything in return. Later that night, as she gave the mare a gentle brush, Sam noticed something strange. Beneath the tattered coat, on the mare's side, was a faint marking, almost burned into the skin. It was a brand, half-faded, but unmistakable. A symbol she recognized. Brightmoor Racing. Sam froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She'd heard the name before. Brightmoor Racing, the once glorious racing stable that had been embroiled in scandal after scandal. No one had heard from them in years. The horses they bred, the champions they once had all been forgotten. Disgraced. But why was this horse branded with that symbol? And what had happened to her? As Sam stared at the brand, she felt a chill run down her spine. She had no idea what she was getting into, but one thing was certain. Saving Silver Echo wouldn't be as simple as she thought. Sam Lawson had never considered herself special. She was just another girl from the small town of Davie, Wyoming. A town that seemed to have forgotten how to dream. At 18 years old, she felt older than her years. Life hadn't exactly gone the way she'd expected. She used to believe in fairy tales, and in happy endings, and in the possibility of escaping her reality. But now she was just trying to keep her head above water. When her parents' messy divorce had torn her world apart, it had felt like she was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. Her dad had packed his bags and left without a word, and well, her mom had tried, but there wasn't much she could do. Sam was sent to live with her Aunt Lorna on the rundown farm, the one that had once been a thriving, hopeful place but now stood as a reminder of better times that had long passed. Aunt Lorna was good to her. At least she didn't have to deal with the crushing silence of her old home anymore. The farm was quiet, but there was a kind of peace in it. The only problem was that the peace came at a cost. Lorna had her own burdens, having lost her husband to illness years ago, and the farm, which had once been her pride, was now barely enough to keep them afloat. The horses were a distant memory, just like the dreams of expansion and growth that had once seemed so possible. But Sam had one thing left, the love of horses. It had been the one constant, the one thing she could turn to when everything else seemed broken. Horses didn't judge you. They didn't care if you came from a broken family or if your world was falling apart. They just accepted you, and that was enough. Despite her aunt's warnings about taking on another animal, especially one as broken as the mare she had just bought, Sam felt a pull she couldn't explain. Silver Echo wasn't just any horse. There was something in her eyes, but something that called to Sam's very soul, like she was meant to find her, to heal her. And in a strange way, Sam felt like the horse's brokenness mirrored her own. The first few days after bringing Silver Echo to the farm were tense. Sam had no experience with horses in this state. Her aunt had always handled them, and the horses they had before had been healthy and well-trained. This mare was different. She was skittish, wild, in ways that were almost unnatural. And yet, when Sam was near, Echo seemed to settle, as though she sensed Sam's need for something to hold on to. Aunt Lorna didn't say much, but Sam could feel the doubt in her eyes as she watched the young girl working with the mare. "You sure about this, Sam?" she had asked one evening, her voice filled with concern. "You've got enough on your plate. You don't need to be adding more worry." "I know, Aunt Lorna," Sam replied, brushing her hair out of her face as she spoke. "But she needs me, and I think I need her too." Lorna sighed, sitting down on the porch and lighting a cigarette. "Just don't let her be the thing that breaks you, kid. Sometimes it's better to walk away before you get in too deep." But Sam wasn't going to walk away, not from Echo and not from herself. The more she worked with the horse, the more she realized just how much of her own pain was wrapped up in the mare's struggles. Both of them were fighting to survive. Both of them were haunted by their pasts, and both of them had something to prove. As Sam continued to care for the horse, she discovered more about Echo's past, both in the physical sense and through the clues hidden within her. One day, while cleaning Echo's old saddle, Sam found a small piece of paper wedged into the fabric. It was a receipt, worn and faded, but the name on it stood out clearly, Brightmoor Racing. Sam's heart skipped a beat. Brightmoor Racing, the name had been infamous a few years ago. A horse racing stable that had once been one of the best, known for breeding cherished champions. But the scandals, the accusations of fixing races and doping horses had torn the once glorious name to pieces. There had been rumors, but the truth had always remained elusive, buried by the powerful men who ran the operation. Sam had heard whispers about Brightmoor and the shady deals that had surrounded them. But now, here was proof that Echo had been a part of that world. Her old saddle, her branded hide, and now this receipt that tied her directly to Brightmoor Racing. Sam's curiosity, already piqued by the horse's mysterious past, deepened. Who had owned her? Why had they abandoned her like this? And more importantly, why had she ended up at that auction? There were too many questions, too many things that didn't add up. The more Sam thought about it, the more she knew she couldn't leave it alone. She had to know the truth, for herself and for Echo. The horse's story wasn't just hers alone. It was tied to something bigger, something that had the potential to change everything. As the days passed, Sam found herself obsessing over Echo's past. She'd spend hours on the computer, searching through old news articles, forums, anything she could find about Brightmoor Racing. What she uncovered made her stomach churn. Corruption, lies, and illegal practices all pointed to a dark truth about the stable. But no one had ever been able to prove anything. No one had ever gotten close enough to crack the case wide open, until now. With the brand on Echo's side, the receipt, and the deepening mystery, Sam knew she was standing at the edge of something monumental. But it wasn't just the mare's past that had caught her attention. It was the feeling in her gut, the feeling that saving Echo from her past wasn't just about helping a horse. It was about exposing a lie that had been buried for far too long. And Sam was going to uncover it, whatever it took. Sam stood in the barn, her fingers brushing the worn leather of the mare's saddle. The barn was quiet, save for the soft sound of Echo's breathing. Silver Echo had come to her in such a broken state, physically battered and emotionally distant. But now Sam could see a subtle change. The mare had started to trust her, just a little bit. It was slow, like the thawing of ice, but it was there. And for the first time in months, Sam felt like she might be able to fix something, something that wasn't already too far gone. But there was still the brand, the faint, half-burned symbol on Echo's side that kept tugging at Sam's thoughts. She couldn't get the name Brightmoor Racing out of her head. The receipt she had found in the saddle was the first piece of the puzzle. But Sam knew she needed more. A brand was a mark of ownership, and Echo's had clearly come from a world of power and money, a world that had ruined her. She couldn't shake the feeling that uncovering Echo's past was the key to understanding everything. That night, Sam sat in front of her computer, her fingers tapping nervously on the keys as she sifted through articles, old news reports, and rumors. The name Brightmoor Racing was notorious in the horse racing world, but it had disappeared from the public eye years ago, and most people had assumed the stable had gone under, a casualty of scandal and bad press. But the stories surrounding Brightmoor were far from ordinary. There had been whispers about fixed races, drugging horses to enhance their performance, and shady deals with high-profile clients. The deeper Sam dug, the darker it got. She found reports about horses that had mysteriously disappeared, injuries that were covered up, and whispers about a jockey who had gone missing under strange circumstances. As Sam read through the old articles, one name kept popping up, Jordan Price. He had been one of Brightmoor Racing's top jockeys before he vanished without a trace. Jordan Price's disappearance had never been solved. Some said he'd left voluntarily, some said he'd been silenced. There were even rumors that he had known too much about what was really happening behind the scenes at Brightmoor, and that's why he'd disappeared. Sam's curiosity shifted to determination. If she could find Jordan, maybe he could help her make sense of it all. Echo had been a part of Brightmoor's world, and maybe, just maybe, Jordan could shed some light on what had happened to the horse and why she was abandoned in such a broken state. Without wasting another moment, Sam picked up the phone and called the number listed for Jordan Price. A long shot, but worth a try. The phone rang 3 times before the voicemail picked up. She left a message, her voice steady, but her heart racing. Mr. Price, my name is Samantha Lawson. I have a horse named Silver Echo. I found her, and she has a brand from Brightmoor Racing. I think she was one of the horses from that stable. I know you disappeared a while ago, but if you're still out there, I really need to talk to you. Please call me back. Sam hung up the phone, her mind spinning. There was no guarantee Jordan would even call her back, but she had to try. She couldn't let Echo's past remain buried, not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. Days passed, and Sam returned to the barn each morning, taking care of the mare. She worked with Echo every chance she got, brushing the horse, talking to her, slowly building trust. But Echo still had moments of panic, moments where her old trauma resurfaced. Sam saw the pain in her eyes, the same kind of pain Sam felt on some days. On the 3rd day after her call to Jordan, Sam was sitting on the porch, looking out at the fields when the phone rang. She jumped up, racing inside to grab it, her heart pounding in her chest. "Hello?" she answered, trying to keep her voice calm. "Samantha Lawson?" The voice on the other end was rough, worn, like it had been through too much. "This is Jordan Price." Sam's breath caught in her throat. She had expected a call, but hearing his voice was different. He was real, and he was here. "Yes, Mr. Price, thank you for calling me back. I have a mare named Silver Echo. She has a brand from Brightmoor Racing. I've been doing some research, and I found your name. I need to know what happened. Please, can you help me?" There was a long pause on the other end, and Sam could almost hear Jordan weighing his words. "You've got Silver Echo?" His voice was cautious, tinged with disbelief. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into, kid." "I know," Sam replied, her voice firm, "but I can't just leave her like this. I need to know what happened to her, what happened at Brightmoor." Jordan sighed deeply, as though he'd been carrying a burden for far too long. I knew something was wrong the moment I laid eyes on that horse. Brightmoor racing wasn't just a business. It was a machine. They used horses like Echo. They treated them like property, like tools to make money. I don't know all the details, but I do know that Echo's story isn't just about her. It's about what happened behind those closed doors. And whoever's behind this is dangerous. Sam's stomach churned. What do you mean? What are they hiding? Everything. Jordan's voice was low now, serious. There were drugs, race fixing, a lot of things I couldn't live with. I tried to get out, but they didn't let me. If you're really serious about finding out what happened, you need to be careful. There are people who will do anything to keep the truth buried. You can't trust anyone. I don't care, Sam said, her voice more resolute than she'd ever felt. I'm not going to let them hide what they did to her, to any of those horses. I'll expose it. Jordan hesitated before replying, his tone softer now. You're brave, kid, but you're in way over your head. Meet me tomorrow, and I'll tell you what I know. Bring Echo. I'll explain everything. Sam's heart soared. She was one step closer. Thank you, Mr. Price. I'll be there. As she hung up the phone, Sam knew this wasn't just about saving a horse anymore. It was about uncovering the truth, about exposing the lies that had been hidden for far too long. And she wasn't going to stop until she did. The next day, Sam woke up early, the anticipation gnawing at her insides. She'd arranged to meet Jordan Price that morning, and for the first time since she'd bought Silver Echo, she felt a sense of purpose, like she was on the verge of uncovering something much bigger than she'd ever expected. Sam saddled Echo up, careful as she adjusted the worn leather straps. The mare stood calmly in the stall, her large eyes meeting Sam's, as if sensing the gravity of what was about to happen. Sam whispered to her, "We're going to find the truth, Echo. Hurry, you're not alone anymore." She loaded up the truck and drove through the winding dirt roads toward the location Jordan had given her, an old barn on the outskirts of town, tucked away behind a grove of trees. The place had an air of mystery to it, its faded wood and peeling paint suggesting that it had been untouched for years. Sam's nerves buzzed with the unknown as she parked the truck and unhooked Echo from the trailer. She approached the barn cautiously, the soft clip-clop of Echo's hooves echoing through the quiet air. Sam pushed open the creaky door, and there, standing under a shaft of sunlight, was Jordan Price. His face was rough around the edges, his once clean-cut look now worn from years of living under the radar. He wore a faded cowboy hat and an old leather jacket, the kind that had seen more than its fair share of dust and dirt. His eyes locked onto Sam's as she entered, and there was a flicker of recognition in them, a shared understanding of the danger they were about to dive into. "You made it," Jordan said, his voice gruff but genuine. "You brought her." Sam nodded, leading Echo into the barn. She could feel the weight of Jordan's gaze on the horse, as if he could see everything in that moment. The scars of the past, the shame of the system that had created Echo's suffering. Jordan approached the mare slowly, his hand reaching out to touch her, but stopping just shy of her face. She's been through a lot," he murmured, almost to himself. Sam watched him closely, waiting for him to speak. After a long pause, Jordan turned to her, his face hardening. "Brightmoor wasn't just a racing stable," he began. "It was a machine, built on secrets, lies, and the manipulation of horses. Silver Echo? She wasn't just a racehorse. She was one of the prized possessions, a symbol of everything Brightmoor stood for. But they didn't treat their horses like athletes. They used them, abused them, and when they were done, they discarded them." Sam felt a knot tighten in her chest. "What do you mean?" "How could they do that?" Jordan sighed, his fingers rubbing the edge of his hat. "They had connections. Money, power, people who could make things disappear. They drugged the horses to make them perform better. They fixed races. And anyone who got in the way, they were silenced." Sam could hardly breathe. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a systematic operation of cruelty and corruption. "And you left because of all this?" Jordan's eyes darkened. "I didn't leave by choice. I tried to get out, but they made sure I knew the consequences. I was supposed to keep quiet, but I couldn't, not after seeing what they did to Echo and the others." A chill ran down Sam's spine. "So what happened to you? Why did you disappear?" Jordan's jaw tightened, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "I went to the police. Tried to tell them what I knew. But, when you're up against that kind of power, you don't get far. They made sure the investigation went nowhere. I went underground. I changed my name, started over, but I couldn't forget what I'd seen. Sam stepped forward, her voice shaky but determined. And Echo? What happened to her after Brightmoor? Jordan glanced at the mare, his expression darkening further. She was part of something bigger than you can imagine. She was bred to be a champion, but Brightmoor didn't just race horses. They trained them for something else. They were testing the limits of performance-enhancing drugs, seeing how far they could push the horses before they broke. Echo was one of the horses who didn't break, but she was never the same after they used her. And Sam could feel her heart hammering in her chest. Everything she thought she knew about the racing world, about horses, had been a lie. Brightmoor racing hadn't just been about winning. It had been about control, about exploiting animals for profit, no matter the cost. So, what happened to the others? Sam asked. The other horses? Jordan hesitated, his eyes flickering to the ground as if the weight of the memories was too much to bear. Some of them didn't make it out. Others were sold off to the highest bidder. Some were simply erased. But Echo? She's one of the few survivors. A silence hung between them, thick with the weight of the revelations. Sam's mind spun, her thoughts racing faster than she could keep up with. She had wanted to save Echo from the pain of the past, but now she realized the horse was carrying something much heavier than she had ever imagined. A story of manipulation, greed, and exploitation. And now, Sam asked, what do we do with all of this? Jordan's gaze met hers again, this time with a spark of something. Determination, maybe. We expose them. We take the evidence, the files, the records, whatever we can find, and we bring it to the world. We bring down Brightmoor racing, once and for all. Sam felt a fire ignite in her chest. She hadn't asked for this fight, but now it was hers. For Echo. For every horse that had suffered at the hands of men who saw them as nothing more than tools for profit. But how? She asked, the enormity of the task ahead of them sinking in. How do we even begin? Jordan smiled grimly. We start by finding what they've hidden. We get the evidence we need to expose everything. And we keep moving forward, no matter the danger. Sam looked at Echo, the mare who had been through more than she could fathom, and for the first time, she knew what she had to do. She wasn't just rescuing a horse anymore, she was uncovering the truth, and that truth was going to change everything. Sam hadn't slept much in the past few days. Every moment since she met Jordan had been a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and adrenaline. She was in deeper than she ever thought she would be, caught up in a fight much bigger than she could have imagined. But as the hours ticked by, her resolve only grew stronger. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. Echo had become more than just a project to her. The mare was a symbol of survival, of defiance, of everything Sam wished she could be. She had watched the horse start to trust her, to settle into the rhythms of farm life, despite everything she had been through. Sam would make sure that Echo got justice, and that meant doing whatever it took to expose the truth about Brightmoor racing. But Sam was starting to realize that the men who ran Brightmoor weren't just going to let their secrets slip away without a fight. She could feel their presence creeping closer, a shadow that she couldn't shake off. It was a warm afternoon when the trouble finally came. Sam had been out in the field, mucking the stalls, when she heard the low rumble of a truck engine pulling into the driveway. Her heart skipped a beat. She wiped her hands on her jeans and walked toward the sound. It wasn't unusual for people to come by looking for something, loose hay, maybe, or old equipment to buy. But the truck that was stopping in front of her farmhouse was unfamiliar, a black, weathered pickup, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. Two men stepped out. They were big, muscular, and their expressions were cold in the way that made Sam instinctively step back. The taller one, with a face that could have been carved from stone, took a long look around before locking eyes with Sam. "You the one with the horse?" he asked, his voice rough and clipped as if he was used to being obeyed. "I'm Sam Lawson," she said, trying to sound confident. What's this about?" We're here about the mare," the second man said, his gaze narrowing on Echo, who was standing nearby in the paddock, grazing lazily. "She belongs to us." Silver Echo, right?" Sam stiffened, her mind racing. She knew instantly they weren't here for any legitimate reason. These men weren't buyers. They were enforcers. She had no idea who they were or how they knew about the horse, but she could feel the tension in the air. Echo's pass had come to collect its price. "She's not yours," Sam said, her voice steady but her pulse quickening. "I bought her at auction. She's mine." The men exchanged a look. The taller one stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low, almost menacing. "That horse has a history that's worth more than you can imagine. You're holding on to something that doesn't belong to you. And you'll make this easy for everyone if you just give her to us." Sam shook her head, her heart racing. "No, she's not going anywhere." The taller man's eyes darkened. "You don't know what you're dealing with, girl. You'll regret this." Before Sam could respond, he turned on his heel, and the men walked back to their truck. Sam watched them leave, but her gut twisted with the unease that only grew as the engine rumbled to life. She stood there, frozen, until the truck disappeared down the dirt road. The next few hours were tense. Sam kept an eye on Echo from the window, but everything seemed quiet. However, her nerves were on edge. Something was wrong. She couldn't shake the feeling that the men were coming back, and when they did, they wouldn't just walk away. That night, after a quiet dinner with her aunt, Sam retired to her room, her thoughts racing. She needed to find out more about who those men were. Were they connected to Brightmoor? Were they working for someone who didn't want Echo's story to be told? As Sam sat on her bed, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Jordan. "They're going to come for you. They'll try to take the horse, and they won't stop. Don't trust anyone. And don't give up. I'll help you. Keep your head down and be ready to move fast." Sam's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't ready for this. She hadn't even begun to put the pieces together, and already her life was in danger. She had to move Echo. Take her somewhere safe. She texted Jordan back quickly. "What do I do? Get her out of there tonight. I'll meet you at the old barn. Bring whatever you can. Don't let them take her." Sam stood up and grabbed her jacket, slipping out of her room and moving toward the barn where Echo was stabled. She had no time to waste. As she walked through the yard, a sudden sound caught her attention, the faint snap of twine. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. The barn doors were swinging open, just slightly, and in the dim light she could see the shapes of two figures sneaking around the corner, the men from the truck. Her heart pounded. They were already here. "Sam?" Aunt Lorna's voice echoed from the porch. "Everything okay?" Sam barely had time to process the question. She ran toward the barn, her legs moving on instinct. There was no time for explanations, no time to think. She had to get Echo out of here. As she rushed into the barn, she heard the unmistakable sound of metal clinking against wood. Someone was cutting the fence. She reached Echo's stall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Come on, girl, we need to go, now." Echo snorted, nervous, but Sam was calm as she quickly led the horse out of the barn. The men were too close, and there was no time to waste. The adrenaline in Sam's veins fueled her, and as she hurriedly loaded Echo into the trailer, she could hear the truck engines rumbling once more, this time closer. The fight for the truth had just begun, and there was no turning back. Sam barely managed to get the trailer hitched to the truck when the first flash of headlights appeared in the distance. Her heart was in her throat. The men hadn't wasted any time. They were coming for her, coming for Echo. They wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. Sam's only choice was to run. There was no other way. She had to protect the horse, no matter the cost. The trailer was hastily secured, and she jumped into the driver's seat, throwing the truck into gear. The engine roared to life, its tires kicking up a cloud of dust as Sam sped out of our driveway, not daring to look back. And behind her, she could see the silhouettes of the men's truck, speeding down the road in pursuit. The farm she had come to call home, a quiet, peaceful place where she had once dreamed of finding solace, was now a distant memory. She didn't know if she would ever be able to return. What had started as a simple act of rescuing a broken horse had turned into something much bigger. And Sam wasn't sure if she was ready for the fight ahead, but she had no choice. Echo needed her. And she wasn't going to let those men win. Sam's mind raced. She had to get Echo to safety. But where could she go? She couldn't go to the police. They had been bought off long ago, and they wouldn't lift a finger to stop Brightmoor's enforcers. She needed to find someone who knew the truth, someone who could help her expose the darkness behind Brightmoor racing. That's when she thought of Jordan. He had been right all along. The fight wasn't just about saving Echo anymore. It was about taking down an entire operation built on lies and corruption. Sam took a deep breath. her grip tightening on the steering wheel. She had to meet up with him. She had to get Echo out of harm's way. There was only one place Sam could think of. An old barn Jordan had mentioned when they first spoke. It was remote, hidden away deep in the mountains, far from prying eyes. It was a place that could offer some semblance of safety, at least for now. The truck bounced over the uneven dirt road as Sam drove, the trailer rattling behind her with every bump. Echo whinnied in protest, but Sam spoke softly to her, trying to soothe the horse with her voice. They had to make it through this. After what felt like hours, Sam finally reached the old barn. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the land. The barn was nestled between two large hills, its worn wooden structure barely visible against the backdrop of tall trees. Sam pulled the truck into the narrow clearing and stopped. She took a moment to steady her breath before getting out of the truck and leading Echo into the barn. Jordan was already there, his back turned as he inspected the space. When he heard Sam's approach, he spun around, his face lighting up with a mixture of relief and urgency. You made it," he said, his voice hoarse, as though he had been waiting for hours. Sam nodded, looking over her shoulder to ensure no one was following her. "We need to stay here for a while. I don't know how much time we have before they find us. I don't know who else to trust." Jordan nodded gravely and gestured toward the far side of the barn. "You did the right thing bringing her here. This is the safest place I know. We've got some time to regroup, but we can't waste it." Sam led Echo into the barn, securing her in the small stall Jordan had prepared earlier. The mare seemed exhausted, but there was a calmness in her now, an understanding that they were somewhere safe. For the first time in what felt like weeks, Sam allowed herself to breathe. She turned to Jordan, who was already rummaging through an old crate of supplies. "I don't know how much longer we can keep running," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "They won't stop. I can feel it. They'll send more people after us. They won't let this go." Jordan paused, looking over at her with a steely gaze. "I know, and they'll keep coming. But this is bigger than you and me. This is about the whole system, about everything they've done to horses like Echo. We can't let them bury the truth." Sam stared at him for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. "So what do we do? What's the next step?" Jordan sighed and turned away, walking over to the far corner of the barn where a makeshift desk sat. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small, weathered USB drive. "This is the key. Everything we need is on this. Videos, documents, emails, proof of everything Brightmoor has been hiding. It's all right here." Sam took the drive from his hand, feeling the weight of it as if it were a ticking bomb. "And this will bring them down?" "It will expose everything," Jordan said, his tone fierce. "The illegal drugs, the race fixing, the deaths. Once we show the world what Brightmoor has done, they won't be able to hide anymore." Sam's eyes burned with a fierce resolve. She could see it now, the endgame. This wasn't just about saving a horse. It was about exposing an empire of lies and cruelty. It was about giving Echo and every horse like her a voice. But there was still a problem. Even with the evidence in her hands, there was no way they could take it to the authorities without putting themselves in immediate danger. Sam thought about Elena Marsh, the journalist who had been investigating Brightmoor's scandals. She had been one of the few who had gotten close to uncovering the truth. But Sam wasn't sure if she could trust anyone outside of Jordan. "Jordan," Sam said, her voice low, "we need to get this to Elena. She's the one who's been trying to expose Brightmoor. She'll know what to do." Jordan's face hardened. "Elena's been working on this for years. If she's still in the game, she's our best shot, but it won't be easy getting to her." "We have no choice," Sam replied, her voice unwavering. "We have to do this. For Echo. For every horse they've hurt." Jordan gave a small nod of approval, then turned to the barn door, his expression darkening. "Then we get ready. It's not just the men from Brightmoor we have to worry about. There are others. People with deep pockets and even deeper secrets. But we're not going to stop until the truth is out there at this ox here." Sam glanced at Echo, who had settled into her stall, and she knew there was no turning back now. This was the fight of her life, and she would fight with everything she had, Aaron. The night felt oppressive, the air thick with tension as Sam sat in the dimly lit barn, staring at the small USB drive in her hand. The weight of what it represented, the evidence of Brightmoor Racing's crimes, was heavy in her palms. The quiet rustling of echo in the nearby stall was the only sound, but even that seemed distant as Sam's mind raced. She knew what this little device could do. It could expose a world of corruption, of greed and cruelty, but it was also their greatest threat. If Brightmoor's enforcers found it, they'd stop at nothing to silence them. Jordan had set up a makeshift office in the corner of the barn, a desk covered with old maps, files, and half-empty coffee cups. He was busy going through some of the information he'd managed to gather over the years. Sam stood up, walked over to the desk, and placed the USB drive in front of him. "I need to know what's on this," Sam said, her voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at her. "Everything Brightmoor's been hiding. Every horse, every race, every lie." Jordan glanced up at her, his eyes sharp. "I know. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. But we need to be careful. Whatever's on this drive, it's the last nail in Brightmoor's coffin. They'll stop at nothing to protect themselves." He plugged the USB into an old laptop and started running through the files. Sam watched, barely able to breathe as the screen flickered to life. The files opened one by one. Reports, video clips, photos, all documenting the horrors Brightmoor had kept hidden for years. Sam's stomach churned as she read through the first few documents. They detailed the illegal drug use, the performance-enhancing substances injected into horses to make them run faster, to win at any cost. Each race was a gamble, not just for the horses, but for their lives. Horses had collapsed on tracks, their muscles shredded from the drugs, but the stakes were too high, and no one ever asked the hard questions. The next few files were even worse. Sam watched, her hands trembling, as video clips loaded onto the screen. They showed the horses, Echo among them, suffering during training, their eyes hollow, their bodies pushed past their limits. Trainers shouted orders, urging them to run faster, run harder, no matter how much pain they were in. It was sickening. "God," Sam whispered, a lump rising in her throat. "How could they do this to them?" Jordan didn't answer at first. He just sat there, eyes glued to the screen, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and his jaw tightened. He'd been in the system, seen the horrors up close. He knew exactly how deep the rot ran. This wasn't just about a few bad people at Brightmoor. This was about a whole culture, an entire industry built on exploiting animals for profit. "This is what I've been trying to tell you, Sam," Jordan said quietly, his voice strained. "This is bigger than we thought. The whole industry was involved. Trainers, breeders, even some of the jockeys. Brightmoor was just the tip of the iceberg. They were testing these drugs on the horses to see how far they could push them, all while making millions off the bets. And the ones who died, they were discarded. Like nothing." Sam could barely comprehend what she was hearing. She'd suspected the racing industry had its dark side. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. And Echo, her mare, the one she had fought so hard to save, had been part of that twisted system. It was hard to believe that the horse who now grazed peacefully in the corner of the barn had once been pushed to her breaking point. The next file Jordan opened revealed something even more horrifying. A list of names. It wasn't just the trainers and jockeys who had been involved. It was people with power, people in high places who had covered up the deaths, who had silenced anyone who dared to speak out. Sam's heart sank as she saw the names of men who had been connected to Brightmoor racing, men who had paid off officials and used their influence to keep the truth buried. They were the ones who had allowed the abuse to continue, or who had used money to keep the system running. One name in particular stood out: Victor Hawthorne. The same man who had sent his enforcers to her farm. The same man who had been behind the shady operations at Brightmoor Racing. "This is it," Sam said, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. Hawthorne. "He's the one behind all of this?" He's the one pulling the strings." Jordan nodded. "Hawthorne's been running the show from the shadows. He's the one who's made sure that everything stayed under wraps. He's got connections everywhere, which is why no one's been able to bring him down." Sam's mind raced. She knew what they had to do. They couldn't just sit on this evidence. They couldn't let Hawthorne and his associates keep running the show. But the question remained, how were they going to get it into the right hands? How could they trust anyone? After all, even the police had been compromised. "I need to get this to Elena Marsh," Sam said, her voice firm. "She's the one who's been trying to expose Brightmoor for years. She's the only one who can help us." Jordan hesitated, his eyes clouding with doubt. "Elena's been working on this story for a long time. But she's been burned. I don't know if she'll trust us." She's had her sources turn on her before. But she's our only shot, Sam argued. She's the one who can help us get the word out. If we just sit here, they'll come for us. We have to act fast. Jordan sighed, but didn't argue. You're right. We don't have much time. I'll help you get to Elena, but you need to be ready for anything. Hawthorne will do anything to stop us. Sam nodded, determination hardening in her chest. She had no choice but to take the next step. She was going to expose Brightmoor racing, and she was going to make sure Hawthorne's empire crumbled. The truth was out there, and it was time for the world to see it. The following days were a blur of frantic preparation. Sam and Jordan knew they couldn't stay in the barn for much longer. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. The men from Brightmoor, Hawthorne's enforcers, would be looking for them, and the deeper they dug, the more they would uncover. It was only a matter of time before they found out where Sam had gone. The barn had once felt like a sanctuary, a place where Sam could hide and breathe, but now it felt like a prison. Even though she was with Jordan, and even though Echo was safe, Sam felt a gnawing sense of urgency, a suffocating weight pressing down on her chest. They had to get to Elena Marsh. Fast. Sam had spent every available moment over the past 2 days contacting Elena, leaving messages, sending emails, but with Hawthorne's men watching every move, reaching Elena wasn't going to be easy. They had to be careful. No one could know what they were up to. And that's when Jordan had a plan. Meet me at the truck in an hour, Jordan said, his voice low and serious. I know a guy who can help us. He's got a connection to Elena, but we have to be careful. If we're not careful, we could end up in a lot more trouble. Sam nodded, her heart pounding. She didn't have much choice. She trusted Jordan, and if he thought this was their best shot, she would go along with it. After all, they were in this together now. The next hour passed in a blur. Sam had packed only the essentials, the USB drive, a change of clothes, and a bag of supplies for Echo. If she had to be ready to leave quickly, but the tension in the air was palpable. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside made her jump. She was constantly looking over her shoulder, her nerves on edge. When the hour finally passed, she grabbed her things and made her way outside. The truck was parked a short distance away, its headlights illuminating the darkened driveway. As Sam approached, she saw Jordan standing by the back of the truck, his hands shoved into his pockets. His expression was serious, his jaw tight. We need to move fast, he said, opening the back of the truck and revealing the bags packed with supplies, as well as a small crate for Echo. There's no time to waste. Sam nodded and climbed into the passenger seat, her stomach tight with anxiety. The road ahead was uncertain, but she knew they had no choice but to take this risk. They had to get to Elena before Hawthorne's men did. The truck rumbled to life, and they headed out into the winding dirt roads, leaving the barn and everything they'd built behind them. The journey was slow, but Sam didn't mind. Every mile they put between them and the farm was a small victory. And it wasn't until they hit the main road that the tension truly began to sink in. Sam's eyes darted back and forth, scanning for any sign of danger. She knew they couldn't afford to stop until they were safe, but she also knew that every minute they spent on the road brought them one step closer to the truth. Jordan glanced over at her, his expression grim. We've got to get to Elena's office. She'll have everything we need to blow this wide open. But we can't be seen. There are eyes everywhere. Sam felt the weight of his words. Every decision they made from here on out could be their last. They were playing with fire. And if they weren't careful, they could get burned. The miles passed in silence. The roads grew quieter as they moved further out of town, the landscape changing as they neared the outskirts. Sam's mind kept racing. They were getting closer. But how would they get to Elena? How would they make sure the evidence they had, the damning evidence on the USB drive, got into the right hands? As they pulled into a secluded area near a run-down warehouse, Jordan slowed the truck. The place was barely visible from the road, hidden behind a row of trees. Sam didn't ask any questions. She knew better than to question Jordan's plan now. We'll meet Elena here, Jordan said, pulling the truck into a space that looked abandoned. She's got a safe house nearby. If we get separated, I'll come back for you. But you can't trust anyone but her from here on out. Sam swallowed hard, her throat dry. What about Hawthorne's men? They'll be looking for us. They're already looking, Jordan said, his voice low. but Elena knows how to move without leaving a trace. She's been doing this longer than we have. We just, have to trust her." Before Sam could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face hardening. "Shit, they've found us." Sam's stomach dropped. "What do we do?" Jordan's eyes were filled with determination. "We move now. We can't waste any more time." They quickly gathered their things and exited the truck, Sam's heart pounding as she followed Jordan toward the warehouse. The shadows around them grew longer, the tension thick in the air. It felt like the world was closing in on them, but there was no turning back now. Inside the warehouse, everything was eerily quiet. Jordan led Sam through a maze of narrow corridors until they reached a small, unmarked door at the back of the building. He knocked twice, then once more. Quick, sharp knocks. The door opened slightly, revealing a woman who looked to be in her late 30s, her hair dark and short. She scanned them quickly before stepping aside. "Elena," Jordan said, his voice calm but urgent. "We need your help." Elena gave a quick nod, stepping back to let them in. "You've got it," she said, her voice cool but steady. You've got evidence?" Sam didn't waste any time. She handed over the USB drive, her hands shaking. "Everything you need to bring down Brightmoor Racing is on here. The drugs, the race fixing, the horses they've destroyed. But we don't have much time." Elena took the drive, her expression unreadable as she inserted it into a nearby computer. "I've been waiting for this," she muttered under her breath. "Let's see what you got." As the files began to load on the screen, Elena's eyes widened. She turned to Sam and Jordan. "This is more than I expected. This could bring down the entire operation. But you two need to get out of here. You've done enough. Now, it's my turn." Sam didn't hesitate. They had made it this far. Now it was Elena's turn to finish what they had started. The day had arrived. The day Sam had been dreading. The day she would have to make a stand. Everything had been building up to this moment, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Elena had taken the USB drive with the damning evidence, and she was already working her connections to expose Brightmoor Racing once and for all. But Sam knew better than to believe that everything was going to be easy now. She knew they were going to fight, and that fight was going to come sooner than expected. Jordan had called her earlier that morning with a grim update. The bounty hunters had already been dispatched, and it wouldn't be long before they tracked Sam and Echo down. Elena had warned them to stay off the grid until the evidence went public. But Sam had her own plans. She wasn't about to hide forever. She couldn't. Elena had arranged a meeting with a journalist from a major outlet, someone who had the clout to get the story out there to the public. The plan was simple. Get to the abandoned rodeo grounds, meet the journalist, and hand over the evidence. Once the story broke, Brightmoor Racing would have nowhere to hide. But there was one small detail. Hawthorne knew about the meeting, and he wasn't about to let Sam and her allies get away with exposing his empire. The truck rumbled as Sam and Jordan navigated the back roads, heading toward the outskirts of the town. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, dark shadows across the empty roads. The abandoned rodeo grounds loomed in the distance, its rusting gates creaking in the wind. Sam's nerves were shot. Her stomach churned with the knowledge that they were walking straight into danger. But she had no choice. They had to do this. As they pulled into the dusty parking lot, Sam felt a surge of anxiety. The place was quiet, too quiet. The wind howled through the empty stands, and the sound of the truck's tires crunching over the gravel seemed louder than it should have been. Jordan parked the truck behind a row of dilapidated trailers, the cold silence stretching between them as Sam stepped out of the vehicle. "We wait here," Jordan said quietly, his voice low but firm. "The journalist should be here any minute. But we need to be ready for anything." Sam nodded, her hand subconsciously reaching for the small pistol she'd hidden in her jacket. She had never fired a gun before, but she wasn't about to be caught unprepared. She knew the stakes. If they failed here, everything would be lost. Time seemed to stretch as they waited in the shadows, their eyes constantly scanning for any movement. Sam's breath came in shallow bursts, her pulse quickening with every passing second. She could feel the tension in the air like an electric charge. And every creak of the wind made her jump. Then, a noise. A low rumble in the distance. Sam's heart skipped a beat as headlights cut through the darkness. They weren't alone anymore. "Get ready," Jordan whispered, his voice barely audible. He moved closer to the truck, his eyes fixed on the approaching vehicle. The truck came into view, its lights blinding for a moment before it came to a stop a few yards away. The engine cut off, and for a brief moment there was only silence. The door to the truck opened slowly, and out stepped a man in a dark suit. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not an abandoned rodeo ground. Sam's hand tightened on the gun in her jacket. This wasn't the journalist. The man's face was cold, expressionless as he surveyed the scene. His eyes landed on Sam and Jordan, and a slight smile curled at the corners of his lips. "I should have known it would be you two," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "You really think you can bring down Brightmoor Racing with a couple of files and a few stolen videos?" Sam's blood ran cold. This was one of Hawthorne's men, the enforcer who had been following them. They'd walked straight into the trap. "Who are you?" Jordan asked, stepping in front of Sam, his posture tense, ready for a fight. The man smirked. "I'm the one who's going to make sure you don't leave here alive." Before Sam could react, the man reached for something inside his jacket. A gun. Sam's heart leaped into her throat. She pulled the pistol from her jacket, her hand shaking as she aimed it at the man. "I don't want any trouble," Sam said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "We're just here for the meeting." "You don't have to do this." The man chuckled darkly. "You've already made this personal. There's no going back now." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. Sam turned quickly, her eyes darting to see a second group of men emerging from the shadows. Hawthorne's goons had arrived. "Run!" Jordan shouted, grabbing Sam's arm and pulling her toward the truck. But before they could make it, the men opened fire. The sound of gunshots rang out in the still night air, and Sam felt a sharp sting as a bullet grazed her arm. She cried out, stumbling, but Jordan didn't stop. He kept pulling her toward the truck, his face set in grim determination. "Get in the truck!" he yelled. "Go!" Sam didn't hesitate. She jumped into the passenger seat, her hand clutching the door for support as Jordan slammed his foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward, its tires kicking up gravel as they sped away from the rodeo grounds. The sound of the pursuing vehicles filled the air as Hawthorne's men chased them down. Sam's heart hammered in her chest as they careened down the winding road, the headlights from the enemy trucks drawing closer. "Hold on!" Jordan shouted, weaving the truck in and out of the roads, trying to shake the men off their rear, wagging their tail. But they were relentless, their headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. Sam's thoughts raced. The journalist had been a distraction. This wasn't just a meeting, it was an ambush. And they were about to be trapped. "Jordan, we can't outrun them forever," Sam yelled over the noise of the truck's engine. "I know," he said, his jaw tight. "We'll make a stand. We have to. This ends now." As the truck tore through the night, Sam could feel the weight of the moment hanging over her. They had come too far to back down now. It was time to fight. The truck tore through the back roads, dust and gravel flying behind them as the headlights of Hawthorne's enforcers closed in. Sam's heart raced as she held onto the seat, her thoughts a blur of panic and adrenaline. She could hear the relentless roar of the engines behind them, and the feeling of being hunted, of being trapped, gnawed at her. "We can't outrun them, Jordan," Sam shouted over the deafening sound of the truck's engine. "I know," Jordan grunted, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "But we're not running anymore. We're making a stand." The truck veered sharply, hitting the shoulder of the road as they took another curve. Sam's stomach lurched as they fishtailed, narrowly avoiding the guardrails. The truck's tires screamed against the gravel, and Sam could feel the ground shaking beneath them. She had never been in a situation like this before, never imagined she would be fighting for her life, for the truth, in such a desperate, wild way. But there was no turning back now. Through the rearview mirror, Sam saw the flash of headlights growing closer. The enforcers weren't going to stop until they had them. They knew they couldn't let the evidence of Brightmoor Racing's crimes see the light of day. And they'd stop at nothing to protect their secrets. "We're almost there," Jordan said, his voice tight with concentration. He was weaving in and out of the winding roads, trying to shake the men chasing them. "Hold on." As the truck barreled down the next stretch of road, Sam saw a clearing up ahead, a sharp bend in the road that led to an old barn, a place where the forest opened up to a wide, empty field. It was familiar territory. Sam recognized it from the map Jordan had shown her earlier. This was where the final confrontation was going to happen. The truck skidded to a halt just outside of the barn, tires throwing up dirt and dust as it slid into place. Sam barely had time to process what was happening before Jordan threw open his door and sprinted toward the barn. "Stay close, Sam," he yelled. Sam followed, her legs feeling like lead, her hand clutching her pistol tightly. The adrenaline was overwhelming, her senses on high alert as she ran. The barn loomed ahead, its old wooden structure creaking in the wind. She could hear the approaching engines behind them, the screeching of tires as the enforcers followed suit. They had no time to waste. Inside the barn, Jordan was already setting up. He dragged an old crate into position and pulled a heavy-duty tarp from a nearby shelf. Sam's eyes darted around the barn, scanning for any sign of the journalist they had hoped would help. But there was no sign of her. Elena wasn't here. The meeting had been a trap. "Where's Elena?" Sam demanded, panic rising in her chest. "She didn't make it," Jordan said, his voice grim. "She tried to warn us, but it's too late. We're on our own now." The ground beneath them shook as the enforcers' vehicles pulled up outside. Sam could see their headlights through the barn doors, the shadows of men moving fast. They had to make a stand, and it had to be now. Jordan took the USB drive from his pocket and slid it into the laptop. "We can't let them get this," he said, his eyes locked on the screen. "This is our chance to bring them down." Sam nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do we do?" Jordan quickly typed something into the laptop. "I'm sending this out now to every major news outlet. They'll have no choice but to pick it up. Once this is out there, they won't be able to bury it." Sam's thoughts raced. The evidence on that USB drive, proof of Brightmoor's dark secrets, was their only chance to expose the truth. But the sure were they didn't have much time before Hawthorne's men stormed the barn. "Get ready," Jordan said, looking at Sam. "We've got one shot at this. You keep them busy while I finish this." Sam nodded. Her hands were shaking, but she was determined. This was their last stand. She wasn't going to let those men walk away with the evidence that could bring down Brightmoor. She was done running. The barn doors creaked open, and Sam could hear the sound of boots hitting the dirt. They were here. The enforcers had arrived. Jordan looked up from the laptop and gave her a quick nod. "Go. We need to buy time." Sam's heart thudded in her chest as she moved toward the barn doors. The faint glow of the headlights illuminated the faces of the men who had come for them. They were armed, their faces set in cold, determined expressions. Hawthorne's men weren't here to negotiate. They were here to end it. Sam stood her ground, her pistol drawn. "You're not getting it," she said, her voice strong despite the fear gripping her. The leader of the group, a man Sam recognized from their earlier encounter, sneered. "You don't have a choice. Give us the evidence, and we'll let you go. No one needs to get hurt." Sam's finger tightened on the trigger, her resolve unwavering. "You'll have to kill me first." A tense silence stretched between them, the cold night air thick with the promise of violence. But before anyone could make a move, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, loud, blaring, and unmistakable. The enforcers froze, their eyes darting around in confusion. Sam's heart skipped a beat as the unmistakable sound of a police convoy drew closer. Jordan had sent the evidence. The world was about to know the truth. A loud shout came from the enforcer in charge. "They're not supposed to be here! Fall back!" The enforcers hesitated for a moment, looking back at their vehicles. But it was too late. The police had arrived in force, their flashing lights illuminating the entire field. The cavalry had come. A standoff broke out, chaos erupting as the enforcers tried to make a run for it, but the police were closing in fast. In the confusion, Sam and Jordan took cover inside the barn, their eyes wide with disbelief. The sound of gunfire echoed through the air, but it wasn't directed at them. The enforcers had nowhere to run. Minutes later, the police had secured the area. Sam and Jordan stepped out, their legs weak with exhaustion. Elena had managed to alert the authorities just in time, and now Brightmoor Racing's empire was crumbling. The journalist's name would be on every headline. The world would know what had happened to Echo, Eyes, and to every horse that had suffered. Sam's fight had been worth it. And as she stood there, watching the police take the enforcers away in handcuffs, she knew it was only the beginning. As the dust settled, Jordan turned to Sam. "You did it. We did it." Sam smiled, her eyes meeting echoes in the barn behind them. The mare was safe, and so was she. And for the first time in a long time, Sam felt like she could finally breathe,